Trump is massively outperforming in the early voting results in these 7 swing states and has actually taken the lead in states like Nevada and Arizona, 2 states that could very well decide control of the White House. This could change everything. And so in this video, we're going to be taking a look at the early voting results in all 7 swing states as well as Virginia. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. So let's first start off with the national early voting data. Back in 2020, 20 days out from the election, the mail-in ballots were about 20 million. But now in 2024, there's only been 7 million cast out, and that's really not a good sign for Democrats, as mail-in ballots have been a very key role in electing Democrats, especially in 2020. And so you can see that this voting data is already down for Democrats. That's already one bad sign for them. Now we're going to take a look at the state of Arizona. So back in 2020, Joe Biden won Arizona by 0.3%. If we look at the early voting data in Arizona, we see that right now, out of the 75,000 mail-in and early in-person votes cast, 47% have been Republican. Now I do want to caution about this number because 75,000 is a very small number, and as more votes come in, it's probably not going to be 47%. But one thing that is really important to look at is out of these 3 million ballots requested, 36% have been from Republicans. Now, as you know, early voting has been a very Democratic bloc, and really Democrats usually turn out the margins in early voting. But as you see in Arizona, that is not the case, and Republicans right now actually have the edge in Arizona. And Arizona was so close, it was decided by about 12,000 votes. A decrease in mail-in voting for the Democrats could totally sway the election come this November. So according to that mail-in ballot turnout, my best guess is right now Trump has a slight edge in the state. Of course, it's very early, but I do think that because of that positive signs in Arizona, I do think Trump right now has a small edge in Arizona. The next state that we're going to look at is Nevada. Now, Nevada was a close election in 2020. Biden won it by 2.4% by about 30,000 votes. Now, if we look at the early voting in Nevada, we see that out of the 475,000 mail-in ballots requested, 40% have been Republican to only 25% for the registered Democrats. Now, back in 2020, Donald Trump had not really encouraged mail-in voting or really early in person. But now you've seen a new thing. Now, Donald Trump is actually encouraging Republicans to vote early and by mail, and that's probably why you can see that Republicans are doing a lot better than they did in 2020 in the mail-in voting. And so I think that because of this big number right now, and because Nevada was such a close election in the 2020 election, I do think that right now Trump has an edge in the state of Nevada. Nevada's also a very right-trending state, and that probably also plays into Nevada going for Trump this election. Now, the next state that we're going to look at is the state of Georgia. If we look at the early voting in Georgia, we see that out of the 625,000 mail-in and early in-person votes cast, only 48% have been registered Democrats and 47 have been registered Republicans. Now, back in 2020, out of the mail-in ballots, Biden actually won the mail-in vote by about 6%. And you see that Republicans have been really turning out in droves in the mail-in and early in-person votes, and that could have a really big impact on this election. There's also been news that the black vote, which is heavily Democratic, has not been turning out in the Atlanta metro area like it did in 2020. And Georgia is such a close state that even if there was like 1 or 2 points less of Democrat voters in the Atlanta metro area, it could totally sway the election in the Republican Republicans' favor. And because of Republicans' strong early voting data in Georgia, I do think the Republicans right now have the edge in Georgia by a tilt margin. Now, the next state that we have to look at is early voting in North Carolina. And as you might expect, Democrats are doing pretty well in the mail-in ballots requested. 38% have been Democratic, 27% Republican, 35% Independent. Now, this is not too surprising. Democrats do super well in the mail-in ballots requested. And so this is one of the states that Trump isn't doing that well in the mail-in ballots, but he also isn't getting like clobbered by Democrats in the mail-in voting. And North Carolina as a state is a more Republican state. It voted for Trump by 1.3%. Democrats usually get their votes out of the key cities. These cities are where the Democrats get their votes out of. And so right now, the mail-in and early vote isn't too exciting. I still think Republicans are going to win this. Donald Trump will win this by probably a lean margin, just because of how Republican North Carolina is. Now, one thing that is really interesting to look at is the Virginia mail-in voting data. So if we look at Virginia, we see that out of the mail-in and early votes cast, which has actually been like 800,000 in Virginia, 53% have been Democrat and 38% have been Republican. Now, back in 2020, Democrats did a lot better with the mail-in and early in-person votes. And so Republicans, this is one state that Republicans are actually doing a lot better than in 2020. Definitely a lot because of Trump saying to voters to get out there and get early in-person and mail-in voting. And while I don't see it going to Trump right now, it could definitely get closer, and I think it'll probably be about like a lean margin, but nevertheless that would be closer than Biden's 10-point win in 2020. The next state that we're going to look at is Pennsylvania. Now, from just a first look, you might be thinking, oh, Democrats are clobbering Republicans in the mail-in and early in person, and that's partially right, but partially absolutely wrong, because look at this. So 60% of the mail-in ballots requested have been from registered Democrats, and 29% have been from registered Republicans, and 11% from independents. Now, let's say that independents slightly broke for Democrats, so about 6% added to the 60% and about 5% added to the Republicans' 29%. That would basically say that the mail-in ballot request would be like 65% Democratic and about like 35% a Republican or so. But back in 2020, Joe Biden had 78% of the mail-in ballots be Democratic and only 20% of the mail-in ballots be Republican. So this is definitely not a good sign for the Democrats. So that was about like a 58% margin for the Democrats in mail-in voting in the 2020 election. Now it's only down to about like 30 points. So that's a big shift in the Republicans' direction. You might think that the Democrats are still turning out and that they are getting a lot of turnout in Pennsylvania, which is true. But the Republican election day turnout, I do believe, will be enough to overcome the mail-in deficit the Republicans have right now. I think Donald Trump is narrowly favored to win Pennsylvania, probably by a tilt margin. So the next state that we're going to look at is Michigan. If we look at Michigan, we see that out of the 2,142,000 mail-in ballots requested, 50% have been registered Democrats, close to 40% registered Republicans, and 11% registered independents. Now, if Democrats get a slight edge in the independents, that would be 56% registered Democrats and 44% Republicans. And that is actually down from the 2020 numbers. Back in 2020, the mail-in ballots, 70% in Michigan were Democrats compared to only 30% for Republicans. So you see that the Democrats' advantage in early voting has really shrinked. And because of those reasons, and because the Arab Americans are not going to be supporting Democrats like they did in 2020, or at least at the margins they did in 2020, I really do see this right now because of all those data going to Trump. So that would already put Trump at 302 electoral votes. Now we're going to go to our last state in Wisconsin. Now Wisconsin really hasn't had the best turnout, you could say, for Republicans. 40% have been registered Democrats, 19% registered Republicans, and about 41% registered independents. So that definitely is not the best number for the GOP. Of course, Democrats are expected to run up their margins in the early vote. But one problem that Democrats have had is the black turnout, especially like in Milwaukee and Detroit. Well, Detroit's in Michigan, but like you get the point. In these big cities, the black turnout has not been up. And so I could see this one probably going to the Democrats. It really depends. As of right now, I have it as a slight Republican margin in Wisconsin. Wisconsin was a really close state in 2020, going for Biden by about 0.6%, only 20,000 votes. I don't think Kamala Harris is going to be able to get that turnout in Wisconsin that she desperately needs to win the state, especially like in the Milwaukee area and the Madison area. And so for those reasons, right now I have Trump winning Wisconsin. So there you have it. According to the early voting data compared to 2020, Donald Trump would get 312 electoral votes to Kamala Harris's 226. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to smash the like button down below and subscribe. A shout out to our first channel member, Dianna Barbee. We are very thankful for her support, and if you would like to become a channel member, you can hit the join button near my channel's name and the logo. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.